You glance at your phone. It is 3:47 p.m. You know the date, the day of the week, how many minutes until your next meeting, and how many days until your birthday. You never had to think about any of it. It was just there. For most of human history, none of that existed. No clocks, no calendars, no little glowing numbers to tell you where you stood in time. And yet your ancestors still knew when to plant, when to migrate, when the rains were coming, and when a woman was due to give birth. How? The answer is stranger than you think. It involves scratched bones, buried pits, and the moon doing most of the work. Let's go back about 20,000 years to a riverbank in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. A small bone from the leg of a baboon is found centuries later near Lake Edward. It is called the Ishango Bone. At first glance, it looks like nothing, just a bone with a sharp piece of quartz attached to one end. But look closer. Someone carved rows of notches into it. Not random scratches, grouped, deliberate marks, arranged in specific patterns. The Belgian geologist Jean de Heinzelin, who first studied the bone in the 1950s, noticed something odd. The notches weren't scattered evenly. They came in clusters, groups of 3, 6, 4, 8, groups that some researchers believe track the phases of the moon. Think about what that means. Someone, tens of thousands of years before writing existed, sat down with a sharp stone and turned the sky into a physical object they could hold in their hand. Why would anyone bother? Because the moon was the original calendar. It changes shape every single night in a cycle anyone can watch and count. No math required, no numbers even, just eyes, patience, and a bone to mark the days. You don't have to imagine this from nothing. Similar notched bones and stones show up again and again across the Ice Age world. In southern Africa, the Lebombo Bone, dated to roughly 43,000 years old, carries 29 notches, close to the number of days in a lunar cycle. The American archaeologist Alexander Marshak spent years arguing that these weren't just tally marks or hunting scores. In his research through the 1960s and 70s, he examined bone and antler fragments under microscopes and found that many notches were carved by different tools, at different times, in a slow, repeated rhythm. Not one artist finishing a design in an afternoon. Someone returning night after night to add one more mark. That detail matters. It means the object wasn't decoration. It was a record, a running log of time itself, kept the same way you might check off days on a wall calendar counting down to a trip. Now, picture the person holding that bone. She sits outside a shelter made of branches and hide, firelight flickering against rock. The moon is a thin sliver above the tree line. She runs her thumb over the last notch she carved, feels the new one she is about to add. She isn't just marking a day, she is predicting one. She knows that in a certain number of nights, the moon will swell full again, the tides will shift, certain animals will migrate, certain plants will flower. She knows because the people before her passed this pattern down, and now she is the one keeping it. This is where the counterintuitive twist comes in. You might assume that keeping time only mattered once humans settled down and started farming, once there were harvests to schedule and taxes to collect. That's the story most of us were taught, timekeeping as a byproduct of civilization. But the evidence says otherwise. Some of the oldest known calendar structures on Earth were built by people who hadn't settled down at all. In 2013, archaeologists led by Vincent Gaffney at the University of Birmingham re-examined a site in Warrenfield, Scotland. What they found were 12 pits, dug in an arc dating back roughly 10,000 years, to a time when the people living there were hunter-gatherers, not farmers. Each pit, researchers argued, may represent a phase of the moon across a month, with the entire arrangement tracking a full year, corrected against the midwinter sunrise. If that interpretation holds, it makes this arc of holes in the Scottish earth one of the oldest calendars ever discovered, built thousands of years before Stonehenge, thousands of years before anyone in Britain planted a single crop, Hunter-gatherers didn't need time to run an economy. They needed it to survive. Knowing when salmon would run upstream, knowing when a certain berry would ripen, or when the herds would move south before the first snow. Miss the timing on any of that, and you don't eat. So, calendars weren't invented for convenience. They were invented because getting the timing wrong could kill you. That reframes everything, doesn't it? The moon wasn't the only clock available. Bodies were clocks too. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies in the 20th century, including work associated with researchers like Richard Lee among the Juhonsi of the Kalahari, described how daily rhythms were governed by hunger, light, and temperature rather than fixed hours. People woke when they woke. They ate when food was found, not at a scheduled noon. That doesn't mean life was formless. It means time was measured in events instead of numbers. Not 3:47 p.m., but when the sun is at treetop height, not Tuesday, but 2 days after the last rain. The system was different, but it was still a system, precise enough for people to plan hunts, coordinate gatherings, and pass knowledge to their children with total confidence. Now stretch further back, past the Ishango Bone, past even the Lebombo Bone, into the deep architecture of the human body itself. Every cell you have runs on an internal clock, a roughly 24-hour cycle scientists call the circadian rhythm. You didn't invent this, you inherited it. It evolved over millions of years in creatures that had no artificial light, no schedules, nothing but the sun rising and setting, over and over, shaping biology from the inside out. In other words, before humans ever carved a single notch into a bone, time was already being kept. Just not by us. By the sun, by hormones, by the slow chemical clockwork inside every living cell on the planet. The Ishango and Lebombo bones weren't the invention of timekeeping. They were the moment humans started keeping their own external copy of a rhythm the body already knew. Here's the part that should sit with you. Your ancestors, without writing, without numbers as we understand them, without any device more advanced than a sharpened stone, still managed something we now take enormous machinery to replicate. They synchronized entire communities across seasons, tracked cycles spanning years, and passed exact knowledge down for thousands of generations. All of it built from patient observation of a rock in the sky. You, meanwhile, live inside more precision than any ancient astronomer could have dreamed of. Atomic clocks, accurate to a billionth of a second. Calendars synced across billions of phones simultaneously. And yet, how often do you actually look up at the moon? How often do you notice it's full, or new, or waxing toward something? The tool your ancestors depended on for survival is still hanging in the sky above you tonight. You've just stopped needing to watch it. Now look at your phone. It still says 3:47 p.m., but somewhere above the light pollution, the moon is doing exactly what it's always done, whether or not anyone is counting.